names on the registration list, so excited that you all are along for the ride. If you've been with us for webinars in the past, thanks for coming back. Glad you're here. Glad you found the information valuable. Glad you're coming back. If this is your first time, I'll tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. My name's Matt Bear. Again, I founded Q4 Launch about 8 years ago, and we are a marketing agency that specializes in the travel industry with customers from Hong Kong to Maui and everywhere in between you can imagine. We are fortunate to work in an industry that we absolutely love and help put more heads in beds for our lodging customers. So today we're going to talk about website design trends specifically, some things that we're seeing and incorporating into websites that we're building, as well as some cool trends that we're seeing in some other people's designs, some things going on in other industries and around the marketplace as well. So excited to share some of those thoughts with you, hopefully challenge the way you're thinking about some things and give you some new ideas. You know, maybe doing a new website is on your list here in the next couple months. Hopefully you'll come away from today's webinar with some new ideas, and of course, in our typical style, give you some next steps you can take towards the end of our time together today. So before we dive into that, we will be emailing a copy of this recording out. So I know I tend to talk pretty fast, and we have a lot of content we want to move through. So we'll be emailing a copy of that out. So it will go out to all attendees for y'all. And then we will also have some time for Q&A at the end of our webinar together today. So if you have questions, we're going to be using the chat panel for that. Feel free to drop those in the chat panel at any point. When you put that in the chat panel, I'll jump onto it at the end of our time together, and I will answer as many of those questions as we can based on how long it takes me to get through our content here. Lots of visuals in our content today, so it may take a little bit longer. But let's rock and roll with all that in mind. So here we go. We're going to dive straight in. The first thing we want to talk about is mobile booking, and mobile booking is here now, and it's got to be fast, right? I mean, basically everything we're talking about here is of the speed of mobile booking. I travel quite a bit, as you can imagine, and this is a screenshot from my phone from some research I was doing preparing for this. It's specifically a hotel. I was just doing a search in Charleston, South Carolina, where we're from, where our headquarters is based. But I was traveling recently doing some speaking down in Florida and Alabama and Georgia, and as I was traveling, I was going between places and had decided to stay an extra night in a destination. So I just pulled up my phone real quick because I didn't have any customers in the area, so I didn't have anywhere I knew I could stay or anybody I knew I could see. So I just pulled up, you know, the closest place I could stay quickly, inexpensively, just needed an off-the-highway kind of place, somewhere quick. And let me tell you, I ended up booking through Expedia, and one of the reasons I did was because their mobile booking experience was phenomenal. It made it so easy for me to book. And I think in the unique segment of the lodging industry, which is where we typically work, we tend to overcomplicate things sometimes. Not us as a company necessarily, but all of us as an industry. We think we need tons of information. We want to know all these things about our guests before they make a booking with us. And I get it, you know, we are more complicated than booking at a roadside hotel. Don't get me wrong, I totally understand that. But I think if we really rethink the booking process a little bit, which is difficult because we are reliant on booking engines and we're not building our own, you know, it's a big endeavor to build something like that, so you have to use the one that you think most matches. But I think if we think about the data that we ask our customer for, we'll realize that less is more. Less data is more in a situation specifically when it comes to mobile bookings because of how fast it allows everything to go. We don't want to force somebody to type a ton of information into a mobile phone on that keypad. We just need to really identify the bare minimum information we need to be able to confirm a booking, and everything else I think we need to look at stripping out of that process. So I know you can't make those changes yourself a lot of times. You have to work with your reservation engine to make those changes, but would encourage you all to talk to your reservation engine partner, your property management software partner, about being able to make some of those changes to speed up your mobile booking process. And if you haven't gone through your mobile booking process, you absolutely need to do so. You have to test it, and I say it again, test it, because you have to know what it's like as a customer to go through that process and really understand, what am I going through? And try to strip that process down and say, could I do without this step in the process? What would it look like if I eliminated this step? I'm not saying what that step is for you, but as we look at the way Expedia is communicating about their mobile booking process, you'll notice a couple things. One is they're communicating speed. big time. Like, that's a big thing they're trying to do. They're also using this, we have 5 rooms left, to create a sense of urgency. The whole other marketing topic we're not going to talk about, or scarcity, but this, it only takes 2 minutes, because that's one of the biggest pushbacks people have when they think about mobile booking, is that it's going to take a long time and it's going to be cumbersome. But it can really be a simpler, smoother process if we rethink the way we're going through it, and if we design for thumbs. You know, that's the other big thing there. It's kind of a weird statement. As I was writing it, I was like, well, this sounds weird, but that's it, right? I mean, we're designing because someone is going to be using this with their thumb. They don't have a mouse, they don't have a clicker, they're using a touch screen with their thumb. And the way we design that process needs to be unique, knowing that. And I love that they use this big yellow book button, because it's really easy to hit a big yellow book button with your thumb. And I don't know if there's significance. Obviously, yellow ties in with Expedia's brand. But as we think about colors and selection and all that from a consumer behavior perspective, I know Expedia uses yellow. I know TripAdvisor uses a lot of yellow buttons in their marketing as well. That could be a coincidence, or there could be something to that yellow button thing. I'm not saying run out and change all your buttons to yellow, but there's a reason behind these big companies who are spending millions of dollars to study this stuff, making these decisions. So when you can, it's good to look at the people who are spending the money and emulate what you think makes sense to bring into your brand, simplifying processes, speeding processes up, and making it as easy for someone to book on mobile as possible. Because mobile booking isn't the future. It is absolutely here now. Statistics really show the power of mobile booking and the amount of dollar transactions happening on it. I was sitting with my wife on the couch the other day, and we needed to order a wedding present for somebody. I was like, just make sure you do it, because I don't want to forget about that and then not have that when we show up to the wedding. And she said, oh, I'll just do it now. And then, like 15 seconds, she had gone on to Amazon, she had ordered that present, and it was on its way with Amazon Prime 2-day shipping. It happens that way, and it's so easy because they have broken those processes down and simplified as much as possible. And as an industry, we need to be looking to the leaders from an overall design perspective. Companies like Amazon, who have spent millions of dollars designing that checkout process. Expedia, who's doing millions of transactions through their process, to really understand how can we learn from those processes. And this is such an important element, because if your guests have a bad experience trying to do a mobile booking, they will absolutely leave and go somewhere that is easier. So that's one of our first tips we want to kick things off with, is just think mobile, think speed. You're going to see a lot of that kind of carried through. Think mobile, think speed, and in a lot of the design decisions and trends that are coming this year. So moving right along, the next thing that we know, and this has been this way for a couple of years now, but big photos are here to stay, but slideshows are not. This was a great project we got the chance to work on with a customer based out of Hong Kong and Singapore. Love the brand, love what we got to do with this company, but some of the challenges we faced are that we wanted to do a lot of big photos, but they also felt compelled to have all these slideshows. But when you pair a photo with a slideshow, the page ends up getting really, really heavy. So from a trend perspective, what we think is that big photos are here to stay. That's not going to go anywhere. But we think slideshows are going to kind of fall by the wayside, especially on the home page. You know, we talk about page speed. We talk about these things that are important. Slideshows are an absolute way to slow your website down. So we're really encouraging people to think away from doing them on their home page all the time. There are a ton of statistics available as well about how few people actually sit and look at a slideshow on your home page. Like, they're on to other parts of your website. Your website is really there, your home page, excuse me, is there to really engage them visually and get them to go deeper into other parts of your site. It's not to sell the entire experience in a matter of 15 seconds. It's to direct them deeper into your site to other parts that are going to be of interest to them. So you really need to hone in on that and make sure that you're thinking about those things when you're designing your site. And maybe it's time to let go of that attachment you've had to your home page. Many of our customers are still demanding that we do slideshows on the home page, so we're not saying no, we're just saying let's pare that images down. Let's not do 8 images. Let's maybe focus on the top 3, because in reality, people's attention span is short as well, and they're going to move on from your home page before they get the chance to go through all 3 images anyhow. So if you aren't willing to completely eliminate it just yet, maybe think about paring it down, going from 8 images to 5, or if you're already at 5, Maybe just the top 3. What are those top 3 images you can just really focus on? But I think that's a good takeaway for us to kind of let go of some of the things that we've really thought about in the past and challenge the status quo. I read his quote from TripAdvisor's CEO who was talking about email marketing. I'm going to paraphrase it for you because I can't get it exactly. And his point was, if you want a 10% increase in your email marketing success, split test it. You'll get a 10% increase. If you want a 10x increase, you have to blow it all up and start completely over again. And I think that's a great takeaway with email marketing, but I think it's a great takeaway for web design as well, and say, hey, we'll just blow it all up and start completely over again. I think when we do that, we have some cool realizations about the way consumers behave and what we are willing to sacrifice or let go of. And we're going to talk about some ways we've blown some things up here as well, and some cool things we're doing with that. One of the things we wanted to hit on, we're going to hit on a lot today, but one of the other things that was a big thing for us, I just came back from a great conference in Nashville, the AIHP conference, for those of you that were there. Had a great time, great turnout. Now, many of you came to hear us speak there, so thank you for showing your support and doing that. But one of the things we talked about was this assumption that people have, and it's the assumption that people are entering your website on your homepage, when in reality, if you have a great search strategy and a great content marketing strategy, people should be entering your website in tons of different places, not just your homepage. Your homepage is definitely going to be one of them, but not just that. And I did some research. I talked about that at the conference, but I did some research when I got back and found that our customers see on average anywhere from 40 to 70% of their traffic enters the website on a page other than their homepage, which means that on average a minority of traffic is actually entering the website via the homepage, which is absolutely huge, because we kind of would make this huge assumption that everybody's going to enter the website via the homepage, and we assume they've seen all the information that's on that homepage when they get there. But if they're not, if they're entering your website somewhere else, you need to be thinking about the design of those interior pages as part of your overall design conversation, and making sure that you're working with somebody that's thinking about that like a marketer, and thinking about the fact that customers are going to enter your site on other pages, and this is all really easy to track in analytics. And if you're doing a new website, you should be looking at those things, or at least working with somebody that's studying those trends to see where people are entering your website. But look at where they're entering and put your time and attention into those areas from a design perspective. So some big ones that we see are listed here: specials pages, blog posts, as well as blog indexes, and other landing pages. You know, you're building content around these landing pages as a part of your content marketing strategy. What does that look like? What does that customer experience look like? If they were looking for something else, not necessarily your inn or your vacation rentals or whatever, but they found your website because you had a great content marketing strategy, how do you get that person who is looking for something else, they were just Googling things while planning their trip to your area, and get them to find you through your strategy, and then get them to stay through a great web design process? So I'd encourage you, as a kind of a takeaway from today's call, to go into your analytics and look at the pages that people are landing on when they're entering your website. So go into your analytics on the left side, go to behavior, then go to landing pages, and hone in on what pages people are actually entering your website on. This screenshot was straight out of one of our customers' analytics. They've been with us about 4 years, and we talk about the power of a great content marketing strategy. When they started with us, they had almost 100% of their traffic coming in via the homepage. In 3 years, we got that down to 47%. So only 47% of people entered the website via the homepage. And then in this year to date, we got that down to 42%. And the point isn't that we want less people entering via the homepage, right? Because the number, 46,000, is actually a lot higher than 38,000 that entered via the homepage. But the percentage, which means we're increasing traffic to other parts of the website, we're increasing the traffic going into the website or finding the website via other parts of the site, which is a really important thing to be thinking about from a marketing perspective. And one of the reasons we encourage people, if you're thinking about web design, really choose your partner carefully, because choosing a partner who is a great marketing company will help you think about the whole process differently, will help you think about where customers are entering your website and everything else that goes into that overall process. So really encourage you to think about that, as opposed to just hiring a local web developer you met at a networking event who doesn't really know the industry and doesn't know the way your customers are going to be using or your guests are going to be using your website. So that's some key takeaways on this point. And I've got to kind of keep moving. I'd love to talk about this longer, but we're going to actually come back to this and some other points that we have together today. One of them is this great quote from Seth Godin. As a marketer, you have to appreciate Seth Godin and what he has done from a branding perspective and a marketing perspective, the books that he has written. He was quoted as saying, content marketing is the only marketing left, which is a huge statement. Content marketing is the only marketing left from a branding and marketing guru like Seth Godin. But what that means is, and our takeaway from that, is that you really need to design your content marketing engine on purpose. And it stems back to that point I was making just a minute ago about not assuming people are entering your website on your homepage. If content marketing is the only marketing left, according to Seth Godin, and there's so much that goes into that, you really need to be thinking about the fact that your website is the hub of that entire marketing engine. And the design of that is going to be a really important consideration for you as you're walking through that. And what we think about is, as the hub of all that, your website, but then we break that even deeper, is specifically the blog. And really honing in on the fact that content marketing, a big piece of content marketing is blogging. It's not all of it by any stretch of the imagination. That's a misconception about content marketing, that it's just blogging. There's so much more to it. But it is a big component. And as such, you really need to be intentional on the way you're designing your blog and designing it on purpose. This is a great example, a little selfishly, right, because it's one that we designed, but it's a great example of what great design can look like in a blog. I talked about blowing things up, and I want to talk about that for a minute. We just went through a process of completely rethinking the way we do blogging and that we design blogs because of the amount of traffic we saw coming to our customer sites via the blog. We've always had calls to action built into the blog and those types of things, but when we just went through this whole process and spent a lot of time and a lot of money doing it, a group of us on our staff locked ourselves in the conference room and said, let's just rethink this thing. Let's blow it up and start again, as the TripAdvisor CEO said. And when we did that, we really started getting inspired by what we were seeing in other areas. If you've been with us before, you've heard me talk about the integrated marketing approach and why that's so important. And that it's going to play out here in the story. But what we know is looking at other places that have been super successful and trying to figure out why was that so successful? What is it about that design or that element or that website that drove so much success? And one of the ones we started having a conversation about was Instagram. Why was Instagram and why is Instagram so successful as a social media platform? And that started a conversation about photography and everything else. And really that customers, that travelers are discovering destinations visually so much more than they used to. It used to be about telling a story to a friend or connecting with a travel agent. It used to be very text-driven. And text still plays an important role because people still love to read that story. But the thing that catches their attention in the first place is typically a great visual. When we look at the reason Instagram is so successful, it's because of it's all based around photography. When we look at Facebook posts that are most successful, we know that they have great photography included in them. And if the common denominator is great photography, then why, as a web design industry, do the majority of blogs feature blocks and blocks of text? So we want it to look like this, right? Highlighting these great images and really honing in on that and that telling the story, not this, right? This is actually a website design we did like 5 years ago. So we're ragging on ourselves here a little bit, but this is the way we designed this blog 5 years ago. It was very text-driven. Now there's calls to action out to the right that I actually cropped out, but it's very text-driven. I didn't want to show somebody else's website because if I'm going to rag on somebody, I want it to be on our old work, but it shows the design change and the progress that great companies make when they constantly blow things up and improve. But if your blog looks like this, if it has a lot of text, or worse even yet, it's just the entire blog post listed on your index, then your blogging engine or your blog design is not designed to help you succeed from a content marketing perspective. You really need to let the images tell that story. And I know this is, kind of a perfect case scenario here with the beautiful photography that's highlighted here, but many of us have beautiful photography as part of what we've invested in from a marketing perspective. And you need to use that photography to tell the story about all the things there are to do in your destination. And if you don't have the right photo, it's okay to go buy stock photography. Yes, we want to use as little stock photography as possible and use custom whenever we can. But sometimes you just can't. And it's more important to have a good quality shot than have a really crappy one that you took with your iPhone. Although those are taking nice shots too. I actually have some art up here in our office that's blown way up that I took with an iPhone. But if the lighting is bad and all those other things, just use great photography to help tell that story. And then these headlines really draw people in. The photo grabs your attention, and then the headline says, is this something that I'm interested in? Am I interested in a blog called Survive These 4 Locations and You've Proven Yourself Worthy? I'm an adventure junkie, so I am super interested in that. The photo drew me in, but then the blog title really made me want to click. And then I can click on that image, I can click on that headline, I can click on read more. It's really easy to navigate through those blog posts based on the design. It's really capturing my attention. So again, focus on those, bring that photography into your blog design, and don't let it just be a bunch of text like most blog indexes are these days. It doesn't speak well for it. And make sure you have calls to action in your blog posts and in your blog index as well. And when I say blog index, again, I'm referring to kind of the home page of your blog where all of your posts are listed. That's what both of these screenshots are examples of, is that blog index. So lots of information tied into that, lots of information around that. But we're going to keep moving, hit some of these other things here. The next one is something Apple has done so well for so many years, and that is less is more, or this concept of minimalist design. If you think about how much Apple has going on, how many products they have, how many different offerings they have as a company, how much they have going on. I mean, they have more cash, I think, than the U.S. government, which is crazy because they're just printing more and more of it over there. But Apple's got more cash than they do, which is awesome. And it shows the value that they have as a company, but they've really honed in on this concept of less is more in their design, and simplifying things and breaking that down. They use this big image well. They're still using that slideshow, but they've only got 4 images in it, so it reduces their page weight, makes everything load a lot faster and move faster. So as you're thinking about design, I know there's a tendency to want to put all these different things onto your homepage and just pack it all in there. This has to be there, this has to be there, this has to be there. But it's okay to say less is more. I want people to go deeper into my site, strip down to the basics and what's really the minimum that you can have there, and then rebuild the other parts and other parts of your website and help people navigate their way through that with great design. The next trend that we see coming is that idea of the long scroll. So this is actually a screenshot of just my Facebook feed. But I chose my Facebook feed on purpose because there used to be this idea that everything had to be above the fold. It needed to be above the fold so that people could see it and digest it and move on really, really quickly. So a lot of us designed above the fold for years. But the trend that we're seeing now is that people don't mind the scroll, and it's actually really easy to scroll on mobile websites. So a lot of people have gone to kind of a single page design, so they're moving away from websites in general, and they're just getting a web page where everything is contained on one page. Not saying that's the right thing for you. I don't think it is because of the complexity of your business and everything else. But the point is that we know from studying consumer behavior that they don't mind the scroll. And I chose Facebook because Facebook is really the company that has trained people to not mind the scroll. They have trained people that it's okay to scroll for days and days and days to see what's going on in your news feed. So when Facebook rolled this news feed out years ago, there was a lot of, everybody was upset and angry about it, but it had really kind of launched this whole idea that the scroll was going to become the norm. And we've seen this trend happening in web design over the last couple of years, but we think it's going to get even this year. So what does that mean for you? I don't exactly know, because again, I don't think you need to go to a single page website like a lot of companies are going towards. If you had a single product, maybe, but it does mean that you can really think differently about design and the way you put it all together, and go to a longer scroll with what you're doing in your content. And that's going to be important for blog design as well, because it allows you to go longer with your blogs, use more imagery that makes that whole page longer, and just opens up a lot of other opportunities for you from a scroll perspective, and not have to be as concerned about that above the fold idea that we kind of used to be so caught up in. Awesome. Next thing here we wanted to touch base on is responsive design. The main thing we want to take away from this is that we believe responsive design is here to stay. We don't think it's going anywhere. Everything we're seeing tells us that it's here to stay. And that's important because as you're thinking about design and investing in that, I'm always shocked as I talk to people about how few of people have actually invested into responsive design, or how few people's site really features responsive design. But if you're doing a new website these days, you absolutely have to make sure it features responsive design. There's just no reason at this stage in the game to not be honed in on those things and be making sure that you're including those things in the overall design of what you're doing. So make sure if you're building a new website, it's going to feature responsive design. And don't just take that as a, okay, it has a check mark, but really hone in and understand what's that look like. How is that broken down? And making sure that when you experience it, that there's a good experience. So this is an example of a great inn up in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. We just launched a new website for them in January. And just an example kind of how things respond based on size. So as you're thinking about design, know that responsive design is not a fad. It is here to stay. And if you're going to design a site in 2016, well, it might not be a new trend. It's a trend you need to commit to. And if you don't already have this, you're not already utilizing it, you need to make this a part of your overall web design strategy going into that process and be committed to that. All right, next thing here, consumer behavior is changing. Is your website design? We absolutely need to be thinking about the fact that consumer behavior is changing constantly. So you can't just be using the same concepts and design standards and everything else that you've been using for years. The millennials are driving a lot of changes as a generation. And I know a lot of them don't like that tag because there's a lot of misconceptions that come around millennials. I read a great quote as I was preparing for this webinar that says generations are saying millennials are egotistical and self-centered, when in reality the people that named us is the same generation that named themselves the greatest generation. And that's kind of a paraphrase on that quote, and that's not at all meant to create generational warfare, but it was just kind of a funny thing. The millennials are pushing back on that term a little bit, but they are changing the way people interact with content. They're changing the way people interact with each other, with technology, with websites, with their phones. Everything about them is changing, and it's more of a mindset, I would say, than a time you were born. We've got a lot of people, a lot of great friends that consider themselves millennials because they subscribe to that changing mindset and that ability to travel a lot and use technology to make their lives more convenient. But what we see in this generation is they are a bit obsessed with their mobile phones. They're always on them, especially the younger part of this generation, and that mobile is increasing. We've seen that trend for years, but that trend continues. We think it's got to level off at some point, right? We know that, so I don't think it will continue to grow to the point that desktops go away. I don't think that's going to happen, at least until we get some of the heads-up display like you see in Minority Report or those futuristic movies that truly could replace a desktop or a laptop computer. Anything, those kind of became one there. But mobile use is continuing to increase. Most importantly, that mobile booking is increasing at a faster pace than just mobile use is. So that's an important thing to be thinking about. And then attention spans continue to shorten. This hones in on to that point I talked about earlier with you don't need those huge slideshows anymore. Attention spans are shortening. You have to get people the content they're looking for quickly. And in that same process, it ties back into what we talked about mobile booking being a fast and smooth process. And then the last there, people are discovering destinations differently. The way they're discovering content, which is a lot of what drove that conversation we had about blog design just a minute ago, but people are discovering destinations, they're discovering trips differently than they used to. And you need to use that information and the changing consumer and the changing way that they behave as you're making decisions about what you're doing from a web design perspective, but bigger picture than that, what you're doing from a marketing perspective as well. One other thing we wanted to touch base on here is this idea of designing mobile first. If the majority of our traffic is coming from mobile, wouldn't it make sense that the majority of our web design budget was centered around mobile as well? Yet so few people are actually doing that. So few so few people are taking the time to specifically design how is this going to look like, what is this going to look like on a mobile device. And we say design mobile first because it's really hard if you design a full-blown website to squeeze that down and make all those features fit onto a mobile device. But if you design it to fit on mobile first, it's easier then to scale that back up and go to a bigger screen. It's easy to take a design that works on a small screen and make it work on a big screen. And it's not about being easier or harder, it's really just a more intelligent way to do it, but knowing the way it's going to look and feel on a mobile site. So when we're designing a lot of things, we're designing that way. We're designing it to say, okay, how is my customer going to interact with this on a mobile device? Let's get that right. Once we have that right, then we can pull back a little bit and we can say, okay, now let's scale this up. Let's scale it up to fit on a bigger device, a tablet, a screen. Let's define how it's going to break, how the lines break, the different screen sizes and everything else. Lots of important things to be thinking about as you're working towards that. But if you start mobile first, it's easier to then design something that also works on a bigger screen size. So that's a trend we've seen happening, yet I don't think enough people are really doing it yet. So if designing a new website is on your list for the year, that's something that's definitely going to be important to think about. And there are some great frameworks and themes you can use that will help you do this. If you're trying to figure out a way to do this on a tight budget, there's great themes that have been built to do this first and foremost that you can use to cut your budget down, because not all of us have budgets where we can develop and devote money to unique designs for each of those things. It costs a lot of money to create unique designs for mobile, a unique design for tablet, a unique design for the typical desktop size screen. It can get very expensive very quickly, but there are other ways. There are places you can find some shortcuts to be able to get that done without having to, triple your design budget for that project because you have 3 screens you need to design to. So a really important thing to be thinking about and making sure that you're experiencing that from a mobile perspective. Next thing we wanted to touch base on here is our belief that the days of static websites are gone. The industry is changing so fast and technology is changing so fast that you absolutely have to have a website that is changing as well. And I didn't know exactly how to kind of put this into words, so the best I could come up with for a bullet point was the days of static websites are gone. But this means a couple of different things to us as a web design industry, as web designers, as marketers, as people that have websites. All of us have websites here, right? And that's this idea that that when the industry is shifting, the way people do business is also shifting. And there are interruptions that come into that process and great conversations that come out of that to say, let's rethink the way we're doing this. And what we believe as a company is that having a website that you launch and you pay for as a project and it's quote-unquote done, that those days are over. That your website needs to be constantly evolving. If it's not constantly evolving, it can't stay up with the times. If you launch a website today and it's awesome and it's the best and the mobile experience is incredible and it's perfect and you love it and you just poured all this money into getting it that way and all this time, and then tomorrow iPhone 7 comes out and the screen size is different and the new tablet comes out, or the iPad, or whatever it's going to be, or some device we can't even think about right now because we're not Steve Jobs, and unfortunately he can't think about it anymore either. But sorry, that wasn't supposed to be in there. That wasn't in my notes. But that it's changing so fast. And if we design that beautiful website and it's perfect and we launch it today, the web designer signs off, you say, I love it, and he's done. But then the industry changes, and now you have to go back and you have to roll out responsive design, or you have to change the sizing of things because screen sizes are changing. The days, we believe, where you launch this huge project and then it's quote-unquote done are over. A great website in today's world, in today's modern, fast-changing technology one, is one that is evolving on a constant basis. Someone is there constantly thinking about the engine that it's built on and saying, how can we make this better? We know iPhone 7 is coming. We know this is coming. We know that blog design needs to change. How can we be rethinking this on a constant basis and building it in a way that we can push those updates to anybody using it really quickly and easily, so it becomes a much more scalable solution, a much more affordable solution for people, yet still a very custom solution. So as you think about that, and this is kind of the point that's in that, but that as the owner of that website, as soon as you launch a website, your web developer's job is quote-unquote done, and your website is immediately out of date because technology will change tomorrow. We don't know about today. And as soon as you launch, your website is out of date. And that's not good news, right? It's not fun to spend 15, 25, 150,000, whatever your budget is, to develop a new website and find out that it's out of date the next day. But in reality, that's what's happening, which leads to a couple different ways of thinking about things and a couple different business models that companies have kind of come to. There's this traditional model of should you own your website, and this question of should I own my website or should I lease my website. The traditional way of doing that is you pay for a huge project up front, bunch of money, but you own the website, you own the code, you own the responsibility, and you own that bill in the future to be able to continue to update that. And a lot of companies, knowing that somebody has to do these projects every 3 years and they're going to have to make these constant updates, make a lot of money by building a base of customers and just selling new solutions as far as updates into that base of customers again and again and again. And that is an okay business model, and you can make a lot of money doing that, but it gets very expensive for you. The flip side of that is this should you lease it model. And in our world, that's companies like Booking Suite that used to be boutique, or Wix or Squarespace. There's tons of places where you can lease a website, essentially. And there's a lot of downsides to that side of it as well. You know, this was one of the things that was talked about at the conference, and it was said that you should absolutely own your website. And I agree, you should own the content of that. But as people, so it's that traditional model, and there's this new model that came to the table of leasing it, and it has a lot of pros and cons as well, right? I mean, everything has pros or cons. As a company, we believe one of the new trends that will come, and we don't know if other people will adopt to this because it can be an expensive thing to commit to as a company, but it's a trend that we have kind of driven forward on, and it's kind of this hybrid model. It's saying, yeah, you can own your website, and you should have the right to, absolutely, because if your relationship goes bad or any other reason, you need to be able to own that website. And we wholeheartedly agree for lots of reasons. But on the flip side of that, we don't think it's necessarily in your best interest to launch an expensive project and then it be out of date very quickly, because no one is responsible for taking ownership of updating that on a regular basis. And that's where we built this hybrid model where all of our customers own, well, I can't say all of them, because we still do that traditional model. We have a lot of customers we do that traditional model with because they insist on it, and that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we have a lot of other customers that want this hybrid model where they own the rights to their website, meaning at any point they can switch pricing models and they can own the rights to it. But they get the best of both worlds because they don't have to pay that huge upfront fee at the very beginning, and they also get the continual updates of the lease it model, and they have the control of the own it model. So you get the continual updates, the constant make it better every day that comes from the lease model, right? If you lease a car, you get maintenance with it. That's part of the package because they want you to take care of that car. So you get the best of that world, but you also have the control and the ownership opportunity of the own it models. And we think that's pretty unique, but I think a lot of companies are going to move to this. That's why I know I'm talking a lot about us right now, which we don't usually do on webinars, but we're the only company I know who has this model. I'm sure there are others out there. I just haven't come across them. But it's an important thing for you to be thinking about because it's truly a situation, one of the few situations in life where you can have the best of both worlds. So thinking about that is a huge opportunity. And we have customers on the own it model and we have customers on the lease it model. All of our customers on the lease it model, we give them the right to switch to the own it model at any point they want to, which is so huge because you can own that site without having to front that money right away. So that's a big advantage for you as a customer, to be in complete control and have the best of both those worlds. So as we move forward, I think more people will adopt that. And as you're thinking about web design this year, and maybe you're thinking about those two models, the own it versus the lease it model, and you're kind of torn in the middle, or you have strong feelings maybe one way or the other, again, we want to challenge the way you think about some things and say, is it possible that there's a better way? And finding somewhere between the two, in our opinion, is actually a better way. But that's for everybody to decide on their own, and we just kind of give you that information to be able to figure those things out. So that's a really important thing to be thinking about as you're headed into the rest of 2016. So where do you stack up, right? I mean, that's the question we always want to know, is where do we stack up? How is my website performing for me? We're not headed into a new year. We're in the midst of a new year. I was talking to somebody about an hour ago. I said, can you believe May is 10 days away? We scheduled a meeting for May 2nd. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not ready for May to be here. But that's where it's at. The year is moving fast. And if this, if a website is on your agenda this year, or maybe you're just wondering, where do I stack up on this stuff we've talked about? A great way for you to figure out where you stack up is to request our 21-point website inspection. It's absolutely free for everybody who registered for the webinar today. We will go through the 21 points and tell you where you're stacking up on those 21 points. I'm going to tell you what all 21 points are right now, but we'll tell you where those are. And with that comes potentially, hopefully not, but potentially comes 21 action items of things you could change on your website to improve that today. You can take that list back to the developer who built it for you and say, hey, can we make some of these changes? Or maybe you pick out 2 or 3 that are most important to you. In reality, hopefully nobody needs all 21. Nobody's going to fail all 21 points, but it will help you understand, how do I get my website to improve, to be more consistent with the 2016 design standards and what's happening in the industry. So great opportunity for you to implement some of those things. Awesome. So I know we've had some things blowing up in the chat panel here. Hopefully they're questions and not audio issues or anything else. I'm going to jump in there real quick. If you have questions, now's a great time to go ahead and pop those in the chat panel, and we will get those questions answered for you again. A couple questions about sound being garbled a little bit there. Only see those from one person, so hopefully that was just a connection issue on their report. I apologize for that, though, Tom. I hate that you were having some connection issues. If everybody experienced that, my apologies to everybody if we were having any sound issues. We have had a little bit of internet connectivity issue here in our office. We're in a new office as we grow and expand, and we have had some connection issues. So my apologies if anybody else experienced that. A question here from Alexis. My company is considering a website redesign, but we are having a very hard time finding a qualified and trustworthy designer. Do you recommend any resources? Short of having a shameless plug here, Alexis, we would love to talk to you. Hopefully, some of the conversations and some of the tips we gave today connect with you, and we're hopefully sound qualified and trustworthy. If not, we'll give you tons of our customers you can talk to. We would love to talk to you, but to answer that more broadly for everybody, and we'd love to work with anybody who's here. But to answer that question, some things that we really look at to really hone in on, is someone a qualified and trustworthy designer, are a couple things. Of course, ask for references, right? I mean, everybody gets that. Check out the work that they're doing and make sure you're excited about it. And as you're checking out the work that they're doing, look for things that they're doing that are pushing things forward. So from a design perspective, are they just doing the same thing like that's been happening for years, or are they really pushing the envelope and trying to blow things up and start over again like we talked about earlier on? Because to me, that's a sign of true innovation. And that's a sign of a company you want to be associated with, because they're innovating, they're changing, they're advancing things, and they're thinking outside the proverbial box, if you will. So that's one important thing I would say to really hone in on as you're thinking about that. And then one of the others that I would really look at is this idea of thinking like a marketer. Because one of the big mistakes we see people make when they launch new websites is they go to a quote-unquote web design company. And web design companies look at everything through the eyes typically of a developer and how is it going to be coded. They don't look at things through the eyes of consumer behavior and how is this going to function as a part of my marketing strategy. Your website, as I said earlier, is the hub of your content marketing strategy. It's really the hub of all your marketing, advertising, everything is designed to push people back there where they can make a decision to do business with you or not. So you really need to hone in on that and say, okay, I need to think about this like a marketer would. I need to think about the fact that people are going to enter my website via other parts. I need to think about the role blogging is going to play as a part of my marketing strategy. I need to think about what email marketing is going to do. I need to think about what lead generation ideas I need to put into play here. And if you partner with a company that thinks like a marketer, or that is a marketing company that also does web design, I think your final product will perform much, much better. Because we get interviewed all the time about web design projects. The question nobody ever asks is how well do your websites convert visitors into action? Whether that's bookings or leads or whatever, nobody asks that question. when in reality it's the most important question, because your whole website is designed to get someone to take a specific action, whatever that action is. And if you're not designing with that action in mind, you're not designing with conversion in mind, you're missing a huge opportunity, and you ultimately will not have the best final product when you get to the end of the day. So Alexis, I know that was a super long-winded answer. I tried to answer it in a way that was very applicable for everyone, but that's, to me, what stands out between great web design marketing agencies and just good ones that are mediocre and that can do a good job but maybe not do a great job. So, hopefully that helps. Question here from Barbara. You have previously said that we should have a minimum of 500 words for each blog post. Have you changed your view? Oh, great question, Barbara. Love when you can throw something back that I've said in the past. Can I take a break to get a drink of coffee there? No, is the short answer to your question. I still think a minimum of 500 words is correct. We are seeing some data that tells us that longer blog posts are starting to perform better. So blog posts closer to the 600-700 word mark are starting to perform better. What we know from tracking data for years, and it would blow your mind if you knew how much data we had and how much we track, but the 500 to 700 word mark is one of the sweet spots for success from a blogging perspective, and that's the number of words you have in a blog post. But there is so much more to it than that. It's not just that. That's just one of the items that is needed to get a blog to succeed. So even though I did talk about the fact that attention span is shortening, you need that depth of content to make sure that you have it right and that that Google's going to index it, rank it, and people are going to find it. And on the other side of that, maybe you were asking that I think it should be longer than 500. I don't know exactly which angle you were coming from, because I said things that could be construed as both. With the long scroll, I think including more images and other types of content within a blog post can help with that. Do you have any reservation engine recommendations? Next question here from Alfred. Absolutely, Alfred, we do. It really depends on which segment of the industry that you're in. So I would encourage you to send me an email. My email address is on the screen there, and I can help you with a recommendation based on which part of the industry you're in, how many rooms you have, or properties you have. Those types of things would really go into that recommendation. So please email me and be happy to answer that more directly to your situation and give you the best recommendation, but also happy to make introductions for you, because we work closely with all of them. So definitely check that out. A question here from Tom. Please clarify responsive design. We've got several blogs on our website about it, so I can't spend a ton of time on it, Tom, but the concept is that you have one website that is the same on desktop as it is on mobile, as it is on tablet, and that it responds to the size of the device that it's being viewed on, or it responds to the screen size, and when it detects the screen size you're using, it reformats the content to display it to best match that screen size. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that it answers your question succinctly. A lot more to it than that, but that's the basics of it, as opposed to the old school way where you'd have a desktop website and a mobile website. That's kind of the old school way of doing that. Question here from Kelsey. If you were stuck with the photos that have less than stellar quality, should you pay for stock photos or go without? Again, if you're stuck with poor quality photos, should you pay for stock photos or go without? I would say pay for stock photos, absolutely. We actually spend a lot of money as a company subscribing to great stock photo libraries that we use within our blog content. We don't use them other places on our site or on our customer sites, because those need to be specific to you and your property. But in blogs and things like that, where we're telling the story about something other than our own property, we're telling the story about our destination or things to do in the destination, you can absolutely use great stock photography for some of that. Hopefully that answers your question there. A question here from Tom. I'll request a 21-point website inspection and be ready to start on our Q4 website in June. our Q4 launch website in June. Awesome, Tom. Excited. We will be looking forward to getting that going for you in June, and we'll get you queued up on that. Question here from Julie. Where can we see, or can you send us some examples of your recent work with all of this wonderful thinking? Also, is there an online booking engine you recommend in terms of speed and mobile-friendly approach? Julie would be happy to follow up with you on that and send you some examples. Showed a couple of them today. Our Finesse Collection is one. TOPSIDE In is one. Tons of others, though, I can send out. So if anybody here has that same request as Julie, you'd like to see more examples of some of our thinking and how we then put that into action and design, just shoot me an email. Get an email address right there on the screen, or reply to any of the emails I sent you as you registered, and be happy to get those to you. And again, Julie, on the booking engine, it's going to be real specific to you and some factors. So email me about that. Tell me what those factors are, and I will help you find the right one for you. Another question from another Julie, is it better to have blog posts about things to do in your area or to have a web page for things to do or restaurants? Seems like the blog and the pages are becoming intermixed. Great question, Julie. Yeah, there is a lot of intermixing between those two, and Google doesn't really necessarily care. Like, we haven't seen a trend where a things to do page versus a things to do blog would rank any differently than one or the other. So for something that is more likely going to be included in like a navigation menu on your website, so like your header where all your kind of buttons are for your navigation menu, that's usually set up better as a page. If it's something specific that's not necessarily going to always be on in your navigation menu, a blog post may be better for that. So an example to that, you know, a things to do page may be better to have as a page, whereas all of the individual things on that things to do list, so for example, whale watching tours and restaurants and all those individual things, you could write a blog post about each of those individual things where you have it aggregated on your things to do page. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit more specifically, Julie, but it's not that one is right or wrong, it's just each one we kind of use differently. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, please email me and be happy to connect with you and clarify on that. My employer is as old as Rosie the Reviter and need to make some changes for us to progress. Comment from Barbara there. I bet we would fail all 21 points. Well, you know, it is hard. It's hard to get an older employer who is old as Rosie the River to come around to some of this. But if that's something you know is standing in the way of your business, Barbara, I would say I would set up a call for the three of us. Let me get on the phone with them. Let me show them some results and talk numbers with them, assuming they're a numbers-driven person, and see if we can help them see the light. Or share this webinar with them. Maybe crop out the part where we're talking about them, but but share this with them. Maybe it will open their eyes up. But again, happy to connect with them. Question from Layla here. How well do your websites convert? Of course, right? That's the million-dollar question. There's so many different ways that's measured. We can't share a blanket number because it's different for every customer and every market and everything else. But be happy to share that on like an individual basis where we look at a specific scenario, because it is a great question and would happy to connect with you on that. All right, some follow-up questions here, some of the original ones. If so, how do you see AMP pages affecting the future of website design? Question from Charles. Awesome question, Charles. Glad that you're familiar with AMP. It was something I thought about including here, but there's just not, there's information, but not as much information as we'd like yet on it. If you aren't familiar with AMP, AMP is a new Google initiative that a lot of major players on the web are getting on board with, called Accelerated Mobile Pages. I don't know exactly, which is why I didn't include it yet, because I'm not sure. We're doing some testing and some things to migrate some things that direction. So that's a long story short, but I wasn't quite ready to make a stance on AMP yet. I think it's a really cool concept. We're definitely on board with it, and we're working towards testing some of those things right now. We just don't have the data we want to have. We try not to make a stance until we have data to back up while we're doing it. So, but great question, Charles. Love your staying on the cutting edge with what's going on and that you brought that up. I would have loved to have a whole section on that here. We talked about it, but we didn't quite have the content ready that we wanted to have that conversation. Question from Susan. What about redesigning? Can you work on an existing site without recreating the wheel? A lot of times, yes, Susan, you can, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes, if If the site is a good site and you're just making some updates, that's a great strategy. But if the site's a bad site and it's not worth saving, it's actually harder and gets more convoluted to work on an old site if it's not right for you in the right. It gets a little tough, but it's kind of like putting new tires on a car that's broken down. If the car is broken down, you're not going to invest in new tires, or you're not going to invest in a new transmission, because the whole thing just needs to be scrapped after a certain period of time. Whereas in other cases, maybe you're an fender bender and the car is great, you just need a new bumper on it. And that's a really stretch of an analogy, but it's a really case-by-case basis, Susan. But yes, sometimes you can update an existing site if it's a good site. Other times it's so old and so poorly coded and things have changed so much, it's easier and less expensive to start again. So hopefully that answers your question there, Susan. Question here from Kelsey. For email marketing, what do you see as being the average open rate or a good goal open rate in the vacation rental industry? Absolutely. So in the travel industry as a whole, the open rate is about 20% and the click-through rate is about 2%. What we see from a performance perspective is about a 30% open rate and a 3 to 4% click-through rate. So essentially 50 to 100% better than the industry average. So hopefully that answers your question, Kelsey. Love the question about email marketing, something we're really passionate about. So I'm glad you're doing it. Glad you're asking those questions. You're on the right road there, towards getting that going. So good questions. Definitely some things you can do, or some metrics you can measure yourself to get there. Awesome. Well, I think that's the end of our questions, and we are right on schedule. It's 2:58 Eastern Time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our webinar today. Again, if you are wondering kind of how you stack up on these things, really encourage you to request our 21-point website inspection. I will be sending that out via email afterwards today, so you can jump on our website and request that. So look for that email coming out from us, and we will we'll get that in the queue for you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.